In 2014, Laverne Cox
Did he just say Cox? Cox.
said that misgendering trans people is an act of violence.
Yeah. Sounds to me like Miss Cox is full of shit.
Since then, she has repeated this statement multiple times, but some people still don't want to believe it.
You know why people don't want to believe it? Because it's fucking retarded.
So I thought I'd explain why intentionally misgendering trans people is an act of violence and why you shouldn't do it.
Oh boy, here we go again with more of this politically correct social justice warrior bullshit.
But to get started, we need some definitions. Misgendering is the act of referring to someone by the wrong gender or implying that they are a gender that they are not.
Keep this in mind, nature only created 2 genders.
So if you call a boy she or refer to him as a girl, that's misgendering. You can misgender cis people or trans people, but it's particularly dehumanizing when done to trans people, and it's something that basically all trans people have to deal with at some point.
So what do you do about this? You shut the fuck up and move on. You can't keep going back and forth to suck your mama's titties every time somebody insults you. That's a lot of wear and tear on your high heels, isn't it? I mean, really, grow up.
Violence is a harder thing to define. Several dictionaries say that it involves the use of physical force, including the Merriam-Webster and Oxford dictionaries. However, dictionaries are not intended as all-knowing, unchangeable rulebooks. They change and adapt over time as our usage changes.
And why is it always changing? Because of fucking social justice warriors who want to change everything and take over.
They are almost always descriptive rather than prescriptive nowadays. I would argue that their definition of violence is outdated and doesn't encompass all of the forms of violence we recognize today.
No matter what you dumbasses say, violence is what it is. Violence. So what's gonna happen? Some word's gonna come out of somebody's mouth and stab me? Oh no!
And the World Health Organization agrees with me. In their 2002 World Report on Violence and Health, the WHO defined violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation.
So you're telling me that when I put a video out and I don't get any subscribers because of it, that's an act of violence and those people should be persecuted? Just kidding, folks. Remember to like and subscribe this video.
This definition is purposefully broad. The WHO recognizes in their report that violence is culturally influenced and varies widely across the globe. What some people see as violence...
Okay, so putting your hands on somebody is violence. Saying to somebody, I'm gonna shoot you, could be considered an act of violence. Calling a person who is a man that identifies himself as a woman a he is not violence.
Others may not. However, in an effort to fight violence worldwide, this is the definition that the WHO came up with, and it explicitly includes non-physical forms of violence. They say physical force or power, and they note that power isn't necessarily physical. It includes all types of societal power imbalances. Plus, their definition states that violence doesn't have to result in physical injury or death. Instead, it can result in psychological harm.
Psychological harm? Maybe it's just me, but I don't give a fuck lot of integrity in what Joe Blow calls me.
Given that this is the definition that experts on the topic of violence have come up with, I would argue that it's a much better and more effective definition than the one currently listed in most dictionaries. Therefore, violence does include psychological violence.
Okay, so you think it's violence. I don't think it's violence. It may not be nice, but it's not violence. Don't call it psychological violence. Don't drag all of us into the abyssal realm of fucking liberal fucktard bullshit. Not all of us want to be there.
And misgendering a trans person is absolutely an act of psychological violence.
Oh, misgendering my ass. Listen, fool, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it ain't a dog, and it ain't a cat, it's a duck. And you look very manly to me. Just because you got long hair does not mean you're a girl. Lots of men have long hair.
If you still, for some reason, have a problem calling it violence, then call it aggression or abuse or whatever you want.
Me personally, I think I'll call it Samuel.
The point is, it's a bad thing that we shouldn't do. Ask any trans person and they can tell you how awful being misgendered makes them feel.
Sorry, Super Chief, but like I said, you look like a man, you talk like a man, I'm gonna have to start calling you a man.
It's a way of invalidating their identity. It makes them feel disrespected, isolated, uncomfortable, and hated simply because of their gender. It tells them that they should hide who they really are.
The whole act of transgendering alone is hiding who you really are, so what's your point?
That people will never fully accept them. Misgendering a trans person causes real psychological harm. And not only that, but it contributes to physical harm too. Lots of factors contribute to the extraordinarily high rates of suicide among transgender people.
I guess that's what they call natural selection. Only the fittest survive.
But misgendering is definitely one of them. According to the 2014 National Transgender Discrimination Survey, 4.6% of the US population reported that they have attempted suicide at some point in their life.
Don't get me wrong, I do have respect for legitimate trans people, as long as they aren't just perverts who only want to put on a fucking woman's outfit so he can ogle girls in the locker room at the gym, and words can irrefutably hurt. But this is not violence. Do like I do. Get up, lick your wounds, and move on.
while that number was about 41% for trans people. However, studies show that having a supportive family, like people who don't misgender you,
God bless your family,
can greatly reduce that rate. The 2015 US transgender study found that the rate of suicide attempts for trans people with unsupported families was 54%.
It's hard for your mom to accept when she pulls down your pants and sees a penis between your legs and you identify as a girl. Sorry, but that's just the way it is.
While it was 37% for those with supportive families. Plus, misgendering contributes to a culture where violence against trans people is terrifyingly prevalent. A 2013 study by the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs found that trans people, and particularly trans women of color, were murdered at much higher rates than other LGBT+ people.
If all this shit is going to happen more to trans people, instead of trying to change the majority of society, why not just put these people on some kind of medication to fix their identity problem? I mean, really, transsexuality is caused by an imbalance of hormones, isn't it? So, get on some hormonal therapy, and you won't feel that way. Problem solved. Something to ponder.
Misgendering may not cause someone to go out and murder a trans person, but it does contribute to a culture in which hating and disrespecting trans people is the norm, which does allow some people to justify violence against trans people. However you look at it, misgendering trans people causes real harm, and that applies to all trans people, not just the ones you like.
I can't think of any trans people that I like. In fact, I can't think of any people that I like. I just hate people.
Because there are some not-so-great trans people in this world, just as there are some not-so-great cis people. But everybody deserves to be gendered according to how they identify. If you misgender someone just because you disagree with them, you're basically telling all the trans people around you that their humanity is conditional, and that the second you don't agree with them, their identity goes back to being invalid.
This kind of thing happens to all people, not just trans people. If you have friends who fucking do this kind of shit to you, well, guess what? They were never your fucking friends in the first place. This is a public service message to all people out there.
There are so many ways you can insult someone without disrespecting all trans people. And I know that sometimes you'll misgender someone unintentionally. Maybe you didn't know their pronouns, or you just made a mistake.
We didn't know your pronouns? Sorry, man, but I'm not going to spend all my time trying to figure out what your pronoun is. It'd be easier for me to just walk by and not speak to you. But then you'd probably consider that discrimination, too.
That's fine. Just correct yourself, move on, and try not to do it again. You don't need to apologize profusely and make a huge deal out of it. That's probably drawing more unwanted attention to the situation anyway.
Admit it, that's not really how you feel, is it?
But once you know someone's gender, if you continue to misgender them, that's when you get into violent territory. Yes, it can be tricky to switch over to new pronouns or a new name for someone, but if you respect them, or trans people at all, you need to do it.
Again, it would just be easier for me to say, hey baby, this ain't working out, and say goodbye.
And all of this includes non-binary people. If someone asks you to use they, them pronouns, just do it. If you need help accepting the validity of these pronouns, I've made an entire video on the subject, but you should know that misgendering a non-binary person is just as hurtful as misgendering a binary trans person.
I'd rather stick with people who just don't care, like this friend of mine. She's a woman, but everybody seems to think she's a man. But you know what? She doesn't care. She just doesn't.
Non-binary identities are valid as well, and if you need help accepting that, I also have a video on that topic that will be linked down below.
Or you could just do like I do, stop hanging around people who are whiny social justice bitches and stick with people who have balls.
So, intentionally misgendering trans people is an act of violence. It causes direct psychological harm and contributes to a culture where physical violence against trans people is commonplace. The solution is easy. Just don't misgender people, and call out your friends or family if they misgender someone.
This bitch is a wowsy. I mean, seriously. Okay, so from now on, I'm going to call everyone of unknown gender an it. How about that? Does that make you feel better? Fuck this liberal shit. Just don't talk to someone whose gender you're not sure of. Then you avoid all this they, them, he, she bullshit. Okay, goodbye now. Please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more.